We'll be streaming the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC, live on our website this weekend. You can join our live stream Friday through Sunday all day at ntd.com, but only on our website. You won't find it on YouTube because we need to protect our channel from video removals and possible strikes. We are live streaming all the speakers, including former President Donald Trump. He's expected to speak at the conference on Sunday. It will be his first public appearance since leaving the White House. We hope to see you there.
We worked tirelessly with great success to deliver on our values, American values that have made this such a special, unique nation. Look, this country was built on what our founders understood and then the Bill of Rights that came behind that Constitution. They built a nation recognizing that our rights come from our Creator and not from any government. Our union becomes more perfect every time we defend our sovereignty and we defend our borders. And I'm proud that we were the most pro-life administration in the history of the United States of America. Speaking of backs, I hear President Biden saying, America's back. Back to what? So, right, back to pallets of cash to the Ayatollah so he can build missiles that threaten us? Back to apologizing when Iranians tell our soldiers and sailors to take to their knees at gunpoint? Back to President Biden killing a pipeline? Back to all the things that put America at risk, back to supporting a pipeline in Europe that'll create European jobs. This is not where we want to go back to any time at all. And we certainly don't want to go back to letting China have trade deals that kill our jobs right here in America. We can't afford it. We can't afford it. It's not the right thing, and we don't have to do it. We must be bold, and we must always put America first. 40 years, bipartisan, Democrat and Republican, 40 years of failure. Letting made in China crush us was going to stop. We demanded fair and reciprocal trade. Never forget too, China depends more for us than we do on them. President Trump understood that, our foreign policy understood that, and we protected the American worker from the Chinese Communist Party's predation on us here in America. And when I hear Democrats pretend they care about jobs in America, but before the seats were warm in the Oval Office, they destroyed 10,000 jobs in a pipeline. And I see too, my predecessor's predecessor, green geek John Kerry, right? He thinks these folks are all going to go make solar panels. I tell you what, you ask the good people of Midland, Texas, Oklahoma, or Kansas, or South Dakota, or Pennsylvania, you think petroleum engineers and rig hands are going to go out and make solar panels? No, and you can bet this too, those cheap Chinese solar panels will start flooding into America like you have not seen. And this won't be good for the United States of America. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes we get accused of saying we don't care about the environment. We create jobs that destroy the environment. That's just not true. We didn't do it. We didn't protect the environment on the backs of American workers. There were more job openings than people looking for work for much of these past 4 years. It was an amazing accomplishment. We too spent a lot of time. We defended America in the Middle East, and we defended Israel in the Middle East too. We were told a number of things, right? This was what establishment foreign policy meant. It says we were told that you can't sanction the Ayatollah in Iran, and you can't stop sending pallets of gas to the leadership. There'll be a war. Well, we did, and there wasn't a war. President Trump sent me to Pyongyang when I was a CIA director to meet with Chairman Kim to prepare for the historic summit that was ultimately held in Singapore. You all remember this. We threatened fire and fury. We threatened fire and fury not to go to war, but to deter it, and deter it we did. You know, since those two summits, one in Singapore, one in Hanoi, the North Koreans haven't tested a long-range ballistic missile, and they haven't tested their nuclear weapons. Exactly 0 tests have been conducted. That's real foreign policy. So first, we show up, Paris Climate Accord. It was a job-destroying joke, so we said au revoir. Look, we all want clean air, safe drinking water, but the Paris Agreement was a fantasy for elite diplomats who just wanted to virtue signal. And when President Biden re-entered this deal, I can tell you that Xi Jinping was smiling every single minute, and the American workers lost. We began with workers all across America who we put back to work. We put back to work women, we put back to African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, everyone. Everyone was back working. We did that. President Trump did that. Our team understood that this mattered. We focused on the economy that put Americans back to work. We did it by also securing our borders, giving Americans the chance to make a good wage and a chance to take care of their families. And we also, I'm from Kansas, don't forget, we built American energy jobs too. We rolled back regulations on job creators, and we wanted everyone to take risk and grow their business and create opportunity for people all across America.
Donald Trump taught us many things. More than anything else, he made the Republican Party the party of the working class for the first time since Reagan. He changed the political paradigm. The Democrat Party today is the party of multinational corporations, of big business, of Wall Street, of Silicon Valley.
China.
And they're the pro-China party, putting American workers last for the interests of our greatest adversary and Wall Street interests ahead of the interest of working class, working men and women in this country. I grew up, my dad is a retired factory worker. He made axles all of his life. He identified as a Democrat for most of his life. He didn't like a lot of the Republican leaders until Donald Trump. He was for Donald Trump, but we have to keep voters like my dad in the fray. And under Kevin McCarthy's leadership, under my leadership, we're going to continue to be the party of the working class for a long time to come.
Even in a pandemic, public health policy needs to take into account people's economic and social well-being. Daily needs still need to be met. People need to keep a roof over their heads. They need to feed their families, and they still need purpose. They need their dignity. Ask yourself this question: how far will people go to enforce mask mandates? Once you start lockdowns, how long can you sustain them? In South Dakota, we had some cases in March and April, but the virus didn't really hit the Midwest until late fall. Should we have kept people in their homes from March onward? Of course not. You know, it's important to ask these questions. We have to show people how arbitrary these restrictions are, and the coercion, the force, and the anti-liberty steps that governments take to enforce them. Often, the enforcement isn't based on facts. Justifying these mitigation efforts has been anything but scientific. This pandemic illustrated that many politicians have a totally different vision for government than what the founders laid out. It was once said that the left takes its vision seriously, more seriously than it takes the rights of other people. They want to be our shepherds, but that requires us to be the sheep. Let it be heard loud and clear from us right now. We will not be sheep. Freedom is better than tyranny. We are unique. We are exceptional. And no American should ever apologize for that. We should illustrate to the world that people thrive when government is limited, and people's ingenuity and their creativity is unleashed. We should also remind the world what happens when tyranny and oppression are allowed to thrive. These days, too many are embracing China, a nation that crushes freedom of speech and religion. China literally places religious minorities in internment camps. China responded to the COVID virus by trying to cover it up. And one of their mitigation strategies was to weld doors shut to lock families in their homes. Friends of China are not friends of freedom.
I don't care if you're conservative, liberal, or what else. I do not know what the Chinese party and government has on the Democrats, but it is so powerful. It is so powerful. It is scary. They put Eric Swalwell on the Intel Committee. I've been in a briefing, just myself and Nancy Pelosi. Anyone that's ever heard that briefing would not have him on that committee and would question would even keep him in Congress. But that's what's happening in the Democratic Party. What's the first thing that Joe Biden does? He calls the Chinese she, and he placates to them. He says now what they do on human rights, oh, it's okay, it's a cultural thing. He won't stand up for what they're doing to our universities. He's not. China wins that election if Biden gets in. That's the problem what happened.
If you think about our allies in the Quad, they suffer from the same problems with China too. They get their intellectual property ripped off. They suffer from unfair competition. They subsidize these industries deeply. They've got 5G and Huawei to worry about as well. We're facing the same problems, but it's American leadership It was President Trump's leadership that it took to stand up and do something about it. They realized that a strong America and a strong alliance with America is going to be absolutely critical to stand up to China. And let me remind you, China is our adversary at every level. They built their military now to a point that I don't think anybody could have imagined 20 years ago. Their military budget has increased 8-fold. You know, we have more military stationed in Japan than any place else in the world. It's because of that tough neighborhood that we're in. We have got to be there standing up to China every day from a military standpoint because they're encroaching the South China Sea, the East China Sea. They're threatening freedom. They're threatening the busiest sea lanes in the world. Australia gets this. Their economic predatory practices are awful. They've used subsidies to cheat against us. You can't go to China and open and access their market the same way they can ours. They've got their people in Confucius Institutes here in America. They're doing everything they can to take our intellectual property, and they have. We've got to stand up to this.
As we've seen even in the first month of a new administration, America First's electoral popularity and strategic accomplishments ensure that it no longer belongs to a single party or politician. By successfully realigning U.S. foreign policy with the interests of the American people, America First is now positioned to guide our country through the trials and tribulations of the next generation. Once unleashed, this doctrine has shown it won't easily be tossed aside. The American people demanded a part in the democratic process of formulating foreign policy. Once they got it, they won't ever let it go. Ever. Previous administrations have tried to limit the American people's participation in deciding what kind of foreign policy this country should pursue. They delegated it to unelected technocrats and career bureaucrats with the help of lobbyists and others with financial interests overseas. The overclassification of government documents, the over-reliance on special operation forces, the overexpansion of new and overlapping federal agencies, and the over-politicized nature of intelligence all help to take national security off the table as a matter for democratic debate.
The district that I come from, the average annual is about $70,000, right? So we have a lot of people, that's the average. There's a lot of people working in the 40s, 50s. That's where they're trying to raise a family on, right? Put a roof over their head, prepare for the future. We are going to put a heavier burden on them because these people don't walk out their front door, go down the sidewalk a couple blocks, and go to their job. Some of them drive 30, 40 miles one way to go to their job. How do you get there? Well, there's not public transportation that's available to everybody everywhere, and especially if you live in the rural areas, this is absolutely insane. So the people who bear the heaviest burden, who are going to have to absorb all these costs, are the ones who are telling, don't worry, this is going to work out in the long run. Of course, the left's idea is always that you penalize people by adding taxes and regulations, and you reward a far left agenda that says this is the way we have to go into the future. My only question is, have you ever actually sat down with people who are going through these great tough times? Have you ever actually heard what they have to say? Have you ever actually walked that walk with them? Have you gone into their factories? Have you gone into their minds? Have you seen what they have to do to put bread on the table for their families and then turn around and tell them, in the long run, this is going to be good for you? Yeah. And they're saying, yeah, but in the meantime, I'm trying to raise my children. Yeah. I'm trying to get them ready for a future, and you're making it harder for me to get there. I always thought being able to get from point A to point B, the most economical way, is probably a great advantage for us in America because so many of us live far from our jobs, right? You want to live in the suburbs, you want to live in the country, and you're going to go to work wherever the work is. Why would we penalize the hardest working Americans with this foolish agenda and tell them that somehow this is going to work out in the future for them?
We are sitting on an abundant supply of energy that God has blessed this nation with. Now we have the technology to harvest that energy safer, cleaner than humankind has ever been able to do in our existence. And by default, we want to put all that wonderful asset aside, that blessing aside, and say, well, we'll go down this other path and hope it all works out. I've got a wind turbine on my ranch back in Colorado. It works great. I'm happy to have it. But I always make sure I've got propane in the tank, too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the wind doesn't blow. And that's what happened in Texas. We don't have to look very far. I'm afraid my state of Colorado, on this quest to be 100% renewable, some want to do it as quick as the end of this decade, by 2030. And we're going to wind up someday exactly where Texas found themselves. And not that you don't have energy most days, but on those critical days that you need it, you don't have what they call capacity energy. You don't have storage. You don't have food in your pantry when it really gets dire and you need it. It's just stupid economic planning to say we're not going to use the abundance that we've been given and the ability to harvest that abundance.
There's a new poll that came out, and it literally says the Republican Party grew with the blue-collar worker because it was a forgotten man and woman that Donald Trump listened to the voice that no one else would listen to. And we're never going to forget those people. And that's what we're focused on. Look what happened this morning at 2 a.m. Nancy Pelosi put about a $2 trillion bill in. There was a vote on the floor. She put a tunnel in Silicon Valley that has nothing to do with COVID into the bill. We wanted to take that money and give it to the kids to get them back in school. It's an easy discussion, right? We want people back to work, back to school, back to health. Pelosi wants to put more tunnels, more waste, and the Democrats voted for it. It's a clear place. Who's standing for the American public and who's standing for corporations? It's the Republican Party today, and it's what we're going to be tomorrow and in the future, and that's why America is going to be stronger, because we'll put America first.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.